Alright, welcome to video 3. Happy birthday, Prince. Today is the 31st of March. It's still the 30th of March in Yankee Land. So, just to let you know, today is the official 30th birthday of Sign of the Times. And first of all, I have to get something off my chest really quickly. Now, I wasn't very awake when I recorded my last video, and I said one really stupid thing, and someone very perceptively picked it up, and that was I said the parade tour was a flop. That's got to be the daftest thing I've ever said, and first of all, I want to go on record and apologise for that statement now. I really should have been thinking straight. What I really wanted to say was that the parade tour was only a flop in the sense that, as far as personal relationships went, it was a disaster. Because that tour was when the revolution had been expanded out to the 11 people, so you had the dancers, you had everybody from the family and the time thrown in the group, and the core revolution, you know, Wendy, Lisa, Bobby, Matt and Brown Mark were a bit annoyed, especially with the lack of talent of Wally Brooks and Greg Stafford, two very overweight and ugly looking dancers who used to be security guards, and they did the most simplistic and basic dance moves in the show, and even then they messed up. And apparently one time one of them was having sex with a girl on the tour, and he got angry with her and punched her and put his hand through a glass table, and Prince went ballistic but kept him on anyway. Whereas Wendy, on the other hand, who donated much more musical talent to the group, got fined $500 for opening a can of beer. So these events, and also by this stage, the girls were resenting the lack of involvement in Prince's group, and that's how the revolution fell apart. Now let's move on. Video 3. This is the promotion and the reception to Sign of the Times in 1987. Now, first of all, the first two videos, the last video I did on Tuesday, I'm really pleased, and I really want to thank you guys. It's zoomed up to over 100 views already, which I think is amazing, because pretty much since the death of Prince, a lot of my Prince videos have struggled to get past 10 or 20 views in the first 2 or 3 months, but this one has just been a hit, with a lot of thanks due to obviously people have seen, you know, the ads for them on the org and also on Facebook. But I'm going to keep the momentum going. I've already spent 2 minutes talking about why the parade tour wasn't a flop. I mean, whoever pointed that out, I mean, I've definitely got no anger at all, brother. I think that proves that people really do watch my videos, and I should really think about what I say in these videos, because the parade tour was not a flop. Okay, but anyway, moving right along. Okay, we're up to the time of Sign of the Times today. Today we're briefly going to talk about basically the singles that came off the album, and how well they did, the actual album, how well it did itself around the world, and also briefly we're going to mention the Sign of the Times tour. Now, probably the first thing we'll start with is that we go back to February the 6th. I know I've been holding up this album the whole time, but February the 6th, not February the 6th, sorry, about February 20th was the first single Sign of the Times came out, and already the look was there. Remember in the last video I mentioned that by January 87, Prince had the whole Sign of the Times project in the bag, and it was ready to roll. And the first single came out. Most people remember this as a 7-inch single, basically. First one to actually use this style of label, the Paisley Park label on the singles. This style would remain right through to 1994, pretty much up to the time of Carmen Pink Cashmere. However, design, except for the Batman era where they used the standard Warner's label. But anyway, that was the first single. Prince really wanted a hit, and he kind of got one, because basically, as you know, the last two parade singles pretty much were failures, as Mountains stalled at 23 and Another Love, A Hole in Your Head barely got into the top 100. And he got what he wanted. Sign of the Times became a number 3 hit. It was a great song to lead off with. It had a cool video which basically showed the words, you know, of the song on the screen enlarging and getting smaller with the heart device. And it got to number 3 in America, and it gave him another R&B number 1 hit. I just mentioned that because at this time Prince was getting a lot of flack in the black community because they were saying his music was too poppy sounding and too white, which was nonsense, because he was just having black R&B hit after black R&B hit, and even at this stage his records were selling better on the R&B charts than they were in the pop charts. I mean, Prince pretty much had all the black people and he was carrying them. This is just before rap really hit big. Rap was starting to take off at this time, but it wasn't really until Straight Outta Compton went into the charts and went ballistic that rap just really took over anything that wasn't rap in the black music charts. And proper soul music, proper R&B, you know, had to take a back seat until the 90s, until you got stuff like Jade and Boys to Men. Now, so that did really well. It also got released around the world, and it was actually quite a big hit. It went top 10 in most places. I don't think it actually got to number 1 anywhere, but I think there were a lot of number 2s and number 4s. It was a good start to the project, and basically it was a nice momentum, and the single did spend about 15 weeks in the charts, so it wasn't like just up and down. It was pretty much up, and it kind of stayed in the top 10. I think it didn't get to number 1 because this is 1987, and even though the big hitters of 87 wouldn't really come along today, I'm talking about Whitney, Michael, and a new act called Terence Trent D'Arby. In early 87, Madonna's True Blue singles, such as Live to Tell, Open Your Heart was a big hit. I think that was number 1 at the time, and yeah, so that was the first single. That was good. Then we move into March, and of course the release of the actual album itself, Sign of the Times, which was released on March the 30th worldwide now, I've heard. So we would have actually got it a day earlier in New Zealand, which has a time zone ahead of America. Okay, these are the 2 inner sleeves, you know, so everyone would have got the album. What I like about the packaging too is on the back they've actually written all the lyrics to the songs, which is really cool. Also, hey, you know how to date the first single is that just says here from the forthcoming album. But by the time we get to single number 2, If I Was Your Girlfriend, it's actually got both cuts from the album Sign of the Times, so you know this is after it was released. Okay, the album did fairly well. It only got to number 6 though, and Prince was worried because every album since Purple Rain had been coming down in America. I know there were charts all around the world, but basically the pop 100 albums was what was mattered. Purple Rain, as you know, spent 24 weeks at number 1 and sold about, well, I think it was initially 13 million copies in the States and about 5 million worldwide. I mean, you can add 4 or 5 more million to those numbers now because it's a catalogue seller. Now, Around the World in the Day also was a number 1 hit, mainly because people were still, you know, having the Purple Rain hangover, but it only spent 3 weeks at number 1 and it fell out of the charts pretty quickly after about 20 weeks, whereas Purple Rain spent about 55 weeks in the charts. Okay, both albums were R&B number 1s, and they pretty much were number 1s around the world. Then Parade came out, and as you know, Parade was a much better album than Around the World in a Day, but Parade stalled at number 3. And again, whereas Kiss was a number 1 smash, the other singles did not do so well. And realistically, when you play Parade, we talked about this last year when I reviewed Parade, Kiss is a wonderful song, but it doesn't really kind of fit in the vein of the Under the Cherry Moon sound of the rest of the tracks on that album. Okay, so when Sign of the Times came out, the album got, and also I just mentioned sales numbers. I think Around the World in the Day went triple platinum. It sold 3 million copies initially, and then Parade just got to 2 million. But Sign of the Times only went platinum. It only went 1 times platinum in the States, and it only got to number 6. And Prince got really worried because it only spent about 10 weeks in the top 10, and it was falling out of the charts. And pretty much it hit number 6 very close to its release, so it wasn't doing as well, even though it was still really a hit. You know, I mean, it was a platinum selling album. I mean, after you had Purple Rain, Around the World in the Day, and Parade, it was really a come down, and it was his poorest selling album since Controversy, as 1999 sold more copies. And as you'll see as we go on, when I review the Black Album and Lovesexy, you'll see Lovesexy sold even less copies. But let's stick to where we are now. And Prince was a bit annoyed about that, and I'm actually a bit annoyed about it too, because Sign of the Times was such a great album. You know, it should have sold more copies. But there are some reasons why it didn't do so well. First of all, I mean, if you look at the music on the charts now, I mean, I'm not trying to be insulting here, but generally people who buy chart music, not all of them are the most astute music listeners. They're really just after basically overnight hits and frothy pop and poor quality rap music. But especially as you get later into 87, I think starting in July, that's when George Michael released Faith, and Whitney Houston put out his second album, Whitney, which both had blockbuster hits. And they both did phenomenal business in the charts. And then Michael Jackson came back with Bad, and remember this is 5 years after Thriller, and everyone was waiting for the new Michael Jackson sound. So when Bad came in, it pretty much went shot to number 1 in August the 30th, 1987, and stayed there pretty much all year. Not number 1, but I mean, as you know, Michael had 5 number 1 singles off that album, and it pretty much stopped Lovesexy from going anywhere very far in 1988 too. So those are probably some of the reasons why. Even Madonna released a new dance album called You Can Dance and the Who's That Girl soundtrack in 87, and that even had a number 1 hit with Who's That Girl, which I consider probably one of her weakest songs ever. And George Michael had number 1 hits with Faith and One More Try. And then, of course, another person who had a massive hit that year was Terence Trent D'Arby, who's Introducing the Hardline came out at the same time. That also didn't go number 1, but it was definitely top 10 for a while, and Sign Your Name and Wishing Well were both top 3 hits. And the only reason I mention them, I know he hasn't had big number 1s like Michael and George Michael, is that Terence Trent D'Arby had a very Prince-like sound with that first album. And a lot of people was thinking, like, already at this stage, people were saying Prince had it. He was kind of over the hill. He was getting close to 30. It'd been a few years since Purple Rain. He'd given us Under the Cherry Moon, and this new album wasn't really selling numbers, and for a reason I'll tell you in a minute why it wasn't really selling in the States too, was yeah, that people were starting to think he was washed up, and maybe now here comes Terence Trent D'Arby. He's like the new Prince, and Michael is back. So yeah, but anyway, so we're into promotion. Things are going pie shape. Now we had a good start with the first single, If I Was Your Girlfriend, was shipped to the stores in late May 1987. And it's a great song. It's basically a Camille song. I mentioned we were talking about Camille in our last video. But the gender-bending lyrics, you know, not that you're helpless, you know, that type of stuff. And if you'd run to somebody, if you run to me if someone hurt you, even if that somebody was me. I mean, they're great lyrics, but chart people didn't buy it, and the song was a colossal flop, spending 2 weeks in the charts and flopping at about number 65 or something ridiculous like that. Even overseas, it didn't really get higher than the 20s in most charts around the world, but basically the whole thing did a good job in derailing the album, and it didn't really help matters because this is May, so I mean, he really should have followed up A Sign of the Times with the third single. Now, the third single was A Change. You Got the Look was released at the end of July 1987, and this was much more pop orientated. It was also one of the last songs recorded for the album at the end of 1986, and it actually did a turnaround for the album. It actually became a #2 hit, again stuck behind, I think it was I Want to Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston, and then I Can't Stop Loving You by Michael Jackson kept it out of the #1 spot, which wouldn't have been happy. I mean, basically two African-American megastars were keeping the African-American megastar out of the #1 spot. Yep, and anyway, it's a great song. I had the video of Sheena Easton. It's quite catchy, and it goes, you know, you got the look, ooh, your body's hecka slamming. If love is good, let's get to ramming. So even this poppier stuff, there's sexual references. And this is a superb single, I think, but this did good money. And finally, so they actually brought things back up, and I think it was also a gold single like Sign of the Times. Finally, at the end of 1987, I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man was also released, and it actually became a #10 hit at the beginning of 1988. And it was also did good business. Hot Thing was also flipped over by some DJs who turned it into a hit that got into the 60s, actually doing better than If I Was Your Girlfriend. So there's your singles, but by the end of 1987, pretty much Prince had stopped promoting Sign of the Times. He was trying to promote Black, then he had his epiphany. He went off the rails. I'll talk about it in Video Fight, which is basically the impact of Sign of the Times and how it survived. And yeah, now we'll just briefly talk about the Sign of the Times tour. Okay, first of all, I'm going to quantify this by saying the Sign of the Times tour was not a flop. I know I said Parade was a flop. I'm taking it back. I'll take it back about this too. I'm just going to keep showing you guys stuff because I just like showing off my records. This is another little thing too. I live in New Zealand, in case you don't know. Now, New Zealand made its own records up until August of 1987. But started shutting down operations in March. See, this is a New Zealand record. It's got a raised dimple around the edge. This was one of the last records pressed in New Zealand. But however, by the middle of 87, because If I Was Your Girlfriend wasn't released as a single till June of 87 here, you can see these have got no dimple around the edge, and the records appear a bit thinner and finer looking. These are Australian ones, and from July 87, all New Zealand Prince singles are actually Australian ones. You can see they are much finer made, and because basically they shut down the record making plants in New Zealand. And it got worse by 1991. Pretty much all the Diamonds and Pearls era singles onwards are Kiss singles and CD singles. They stopped importing records in 1990. That's why basically my vinyl collection, it's almost impossible to get a 7-inch single after the whole Graffiti Bridge era, pretty much. Now the tour. Basically, Prince's tour, originally he was going to do Europe first and America, but what happened was something got lost along the way. He started off the musical promotion actually on the 21st of March 1987. He played a one-off show at Sam's, otherwise known as 7th Avenue in Minneapolis, where they filmed Purple Rain movie. It did pretty well, and this is turning out to be a long video, as you can see. And basically it was a taste of what was going on. Pretty much Prince premiered the new band. Now I forgot to mention some of the members in the last video. I've got them all now. Prince was playing Whatever. This is the theme he used through this in the Love Sex era. Sheila E. was on drums. We had, of course, on guitar, Miko Weaver when Prince was away dancing. The dancers were back, Wally and Greg, even though they weren't very talented, they were still dancing up a storm. Jerome had gone, basically, so Jerome in the Parade tour, he was gone to do his own thing. Kat was in charge of the dancing, she was the choreographer. Pretty much, like I said, Sheila was on drums. We still had Matt on the keys, and on bass we had Levi Caesar Jr., who was pretty much the bass player in Sheila E.'s backing group. because even though Sheila had released her album, she pretty much had to shut down promotion on it. So Levi Cesar was bassist. He'd be a very important character in the Prince world. He'd go through playing bass until 1990, when Sonny Thompson was brought in to start the new power generation, and Levi moved on to guitar. And then Levi in 1994 became Paisley Park Enterprises business manager for a short time. And at the end of 1994, he did such a bad job, apparently he ran off with his girlfriend and took a lot of money with him. So anyway, Levi was in, and pretty much, you know, so was Miko. So basically the band had become very black again. The only white member left in the group was Matt. So again, why African Americans were accusing Prince of selling out and sounding too white at this time, I cannot understand. Once Prince ditched Revolution, I mean, it was basically back to the thing Prince does the best, funk. This is pure funk, this music. There was some pop like You Got the Look and everything, but songs like Housequake, Play in the Sunshine, Strange Relationship, Adore, I mean, it's all funk and R&B stuff, and it's beautiful. So anyway, he did that, and then in mid-April he went off to England to actually do some rehearsals at Birmingham, and some fans even talk about how they heard them. And then, get this, starting at the very beginning of May, he started the tour in Stockholm, Sweden. Now, the reason he did this Europe jaunt, he did places like Sweden, Norway, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands. He did a show in Italy. He did some shows in France. Was because, whereas I've been talking about how the singles have been doing declining business in the States, since Parade, his star in Europe had been rising. Generally, the Europeans, they liked Purple Rain, but they weren't really crazy about it. But they love Parade, and they really love Sign of the Times. And as you'll see later on, they just went absolutely bananas for the Love Sexy tour. And pretty much, but anyway, Sign of the Times did good numbers in Europe. He played several shows. Originally, he was going to play 2 shows at Wembley, but because the promoters couldn't get a license, he couldn't do that. And he actually had to cancel the other one, so he ended up playing no shows in the UK at all, which annoyed the Brits a bit. But don't worry, 1988, you know, it was when everything changed. Did Love Sexy in the round. Prince was playing lots of shows in England, and they didn't sell out quite as well as they expected, mainly because Michael was doing the Bad tour. But I would have loved to have been a fan back then in 1988, going to see Prince one night and Michael the next. That would have been so hot. The only other real competition in 87 was Bowie's The Glass Spider tour, which generally was actually a flop. And I'm going to say it was a flop. And I like saying tours are flops, but this was a flop. My partner actually took his son there, and that's actually where they burnt off the Glass Spider at Western Springs on November 87. And Madonna was doing her, it wasn't Blonde Ambition, the tour, but Madonna had a tour in 87. I think Blonde Ambition was 90, or was it Girly Tour? But anyway, Madonna was doing a tour, and it was doing really well. I mean, as you know, I mean, True Blue is pretty much one of Madonna's finest albums. She was doing the Who's That Girl songs. She was doing a lot of stuff off Virgin, and this is before her best album came out though, but basically Madonna in the mid to late 80s, she was on top of her game. So yeah, a lot of people are going. It was basically, a Spanish magazine referred it to rock and sex, so Prince and Madonna pretty much, which made me laugh. Yeah, so anyway, this tour went really well, and apparently just over 200,000 Europeans saw the tour. There were about 30 shows. Pretty much the tour played mostly Sign of the Time music. I mean, pretty much a lot of Sign of the Times was played. The last time he'd played so much Sign of the Times music until, fortunately for me, the piano and microphone tour of 2016. I mean, Prince played, of the 16 tracks of Sign of the Times, Prince played 9 songs complete and 2 more songs bits of. And fortunately, he played Adore. So, I mean, there you are. I mean, Prince knew that everybody loved this stuff. And to be a fly on the wall back in 87, I was an 11-year-old kid. I hadn't even really heard of Prince in 1987, which is a shame, because he was just so hot at the time, this music. You know, I just love this picture. I think it's very cool. I mean, that is actually Prince's legs there. I mean, who else would wear peach-coloured heels? And that was the look of this whole Sign of the Times era, peach and black everything. You know, yep. And see, like, we've got the peach and black lyric sheets here, pretty much. And it is a really cool colour scheme. I love it. And also on the tour, there was a support lineup of Madhouse. Now, as you know, Prince was in Madhouse. And they had to have some changes to Madhouse though, because Sheila E. was in drums on Madhouse as well. So what Prince did was he brought Matt Bliston and Atlanta Bliss and Eric Leeds in on sax. Because they were playing in Prince's group, they brought in some other cats to play those. And they brought in a guy called Dale Alexander to play on the drums so Sheila could play in Prince's group. But Madhouse were quite well received, but they were essentially just an opening act for Prince and his new group. Prince also never named this band either. That's the other thing either. I'm not going to say Prince and the New Power Generation. This was Proto New Power Generation. But I call it the Sign of the Times Love Sexy Band. So I'm going to go with that because I'll give you guys advance warning now. As long as I'm still alive and I'm still under Prince, this time next year we're going to be doing a series of videos based around Love Sexy. just like I promised with the parade videos last year, that I can't wait till 2017 because we're going to talk about Sign of the Times pretty much, and here we are in 2017 talking about Sign of the Times. Okay, but then when Prince finished the tour in June, he decided he was so angry with the flop of If I Was Your Girlfriend, you know. I mean, I would have been angry with it too, but really, Prince, I really would have put this single out last. I really would have gone with You Got the Look next. That would have carried the album on. It might have even helped it go double platinum at least, and maybe give it another run up the charts. But anyway, he decided that he wasn't going to tour America. I mean, the parade hit and run shows, I mean, okay, I'm not going to say they were a flop, but they hadn't done as well as the whole Purple Rain circus. And it was sad in a way because pretty much Prince would not get another tour until Lovesexy in the round, and even then that was after the European tour again. It wasn't until September of 1988, so pretty much March 1985 to September 88. I mean, apart from these one-off shows like the hit and run tours and the showcases at Sam's and the birthday shows in Detroit, there weren't any proper stadium shows in America. Pretty much from the Orange Bowl on April 7th, 85, the last show at the Orange Bowl in Florida. And basically, I think the first show of in the round tour was Worcester, Massachusetts, on the 16th of September 1988. I'm probably wrong. No doubt some Princeologists will go and say, no, he played somewhere else in September 88. But anyway, and so moving right along, he decided he'd make a movie instead. And that's where the inspiration for the movie came along. And originally, they decided the last show in Rotterdam in June of 1987. Oh no, wrong video. Yep, should get the stuff prepared before the videos start. Sign of the Times concert movie, and so he had them shoot the footage of the last show, but it was actually raining in Rotterdam, 22nd of June, and this is also another reason why Wembley would have been cancelled anyway, because this Rotterdam show at the Ahoydal was outdoors and everyone got rained on. There was a big rain front in the summer of 87, and also the same thing would have happened in Wembley, which is outdoors, so that's why Prince played. He played it in August 86, but luckily it was a hot and dry summer in 1986, but I watched the British weather video series, and actually they had a series of really mediocre summers in the 80s. In fact, the summer of 88 was the worst summer they'd had in years, and yet this was the show, like I said, when, you know, Prince and Michael Jackson were doing their tours. Now I think even Terence Trent D'Arby was doing a few shows, and this is the video. So basically he taped it. When he got back to the States, he decided he didn't like, remember at this stage he had opened up Paisley Park to himself but not to the public, so he went to Paisley Park and mastered it. And he decided in July and August of 87 the band weren't going to have a rest and get ready for the American wing in the fall of 87. They would basically retape the whole Sign of the Times show on the Paisley Park soundstage, and they did it. And I think it was finally in October 1987, the results were released onto the Sign of the Times DVD, and that was the catchline: if you only go to one concert this year, the Prince movie is the one. Incredibly, Warner's let him make it because it was only a concert movie. It did fairly well. It wasn't a massive hit, but people did go and see it, and it was pretty much direct to video, but it's a great thing. I think everyone should watch it. And so, and at this time it did actually do quite well, because by this stage You Got the Look was out and people were interested in talking about Prince again. But by this time, the end of 87, this is when Bad is on the charts. This is when Terence Trent D'Arby's out. We've got George Michael and Whitney Houston's albums selling big copies, and people are a wee bit over Prince now. You know, we've had 4 blockbuster albums in 4 years, and so I mean it was testing. And finally, at the end of 1987, the Sign of the Times project was put to bed when Prince played a one-off showcase at Paisley Park on the last day. But no, it was actually the 1st of December 1987, and this is the night where he was going to release the Black Album, but he decided not to because he had an epiphany. We'll talk about this in another video later on, but Prince played these songs for the last time, and pretty much, you know, he took the ecstasy trip. He met Ingrid Chavez, and they lay on the floor talking nonsense or whatever. And this will make you guys really laugh. And then he had a trip and decided, oh no, the Black Album's really evil, I'm not going to release it. And he woke up the next day and pretty much wrote the tracks to Lovesexy. That's a legend anyway. So when Prince's brain entered the state of Lovesexy, he forgot all about Sign of the Times. So there you are, video free. Let's hope it goes to 100 views within 24 hours again. And I mean, the last video even did so well that actually the first video, which was languishing on 35 views, because I taped it back in February, instantly went up with it. I think a lot of people watched that second video and thought, hey, did he do a first video? Let's watch that. But yeah, there you are. So there'll be a 4th video. The 4th video I'm going to talk about basically the actual album itself and the tracks and what I like about each track. And I'm not going to say what I don't like, because there's nothing on this album I don't like. Okay, I might try and find something to pick at, but you know, we're clutching at straws here. We're talking about perfect music, you know, and yes, this is the earlier version too. This isn't the I've had this since like 2005 or something. I've watched it a few times. It's actually really nice. There's a great part where Prince does the splits and goes gliding between cats' legs, which is pretty funny. And then there's the drumming sequence in Forever in Your Life, and at the end of Sign of Your Times. It's actually really cool. And Greg and Wally play Walk On bits, where basically Kat is the aggrieved girlfriend, and she finds love by meeting up with who else rather than Prince. Yeah. But anyway, so it's really cool, and yeah, in the fifth video will finally be the impact. So we talk about how Sign of the Times went from being an album that did fairly well in '87 to basically becoming the cult classic it is today. I mean, this is the type of album. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who talk mess about Prince and don't like him, but they see this and this album and they just think, wow, Prince had this genius album. I mean, this is up there with Purple Rain and to a lesser extent Diamonds and Pearls. But yeah, so there you are, video free, Sign of the Times, mess with your mind. Happy birthday, Sign of the Times. Now everybody, get your album out and listen to it. And if you can't do that, watch another one of my videos. Peace and funkiness.